Greetings, witches, rebels, and general misbehaviors. I'm the Cranky Astrologer. The following transmission is a discussion about magic, tarot, astrology, and chaos, and the relevance they all have in the battle for a kinder, safer, and more equitable world. This is the Mystical Resistance.
When did I start doing this? Like, when was that an introduction where you were like, maybe this is a thing that I can use in that, like, chaos sense?
Yeah. when you asked that, I was like...
Because I don't think we've ever talked about that.
No, I don't think so. And I think I've only had this conversation a few times, but, like... It's a weird one. Yeah. For me, my origin story is pretty strange. My dad was always believed in magic.
Oh, really?
And
wait, your dad?
My dad. So as long as I can remember, my dad was now what I would probably look back and call a witch hunter.
Okay, that makes more sense to me. That he would be like one of those people like searching for everybody's third nipple.
When I was like 3, 4, 5, my dad used to be, he was on this genealogy quest. He was trying to find all the witches in our family. And he felt pro-magic. I got the sense that it was pro-magic, but I was also a child, so, like, who knows?
Right.
But he was doing genealogy and trying to find all of these witches. Oh. And I don't necessarily know that it was... Well, I don't know. It's colored now by things he said now that I've gotten older.
Yeah. Where
it's like, well, I don't know. But my dad used to tell me these stories about how all of the women in his family were witches and how they always had magic. And it was just something we took for granted. It was just, the magic was real. And he would tell me these stories about how so my dad had 4 sisters. And he would tell me stories about how when they needed something, he knew. And he would show up. They'd have an emergency, and he would show up. And that was that was his entire childhood, his entire life. If his sisters needed something, he was there. If his mom needed something, he was there. And I just always accepted this because when I needed something, he was there. When I was a kid, I got bullied. When I started school, I got bullied a lot. And I remember multiple occasions where I would get hurt on the playground. A kid would be bullying me, and I'd get taken to the principal's office because that's what they do. It's
right.
Like, for some reason, I'm in trouble.
Yeah, exactly.
And we'd be going to the principal's office, and by the time we got to the principal's office, my dad would be there waiting. And he worked across town, and we didn't have a car. And he would have already left work and gotten to school to intercept this problem and to take care of me. And it happened enough times where it was just like I said, I just took it for granted. This was someone who had magic.
Yeah. And
I never questioned it. And
it's so interesting that it's your dad.
Yeah.
Like, knowing what I know about his interactions with you now.
Yeah.
And now he's living in that, and he's, oh, do you need money? Like, it's so... He sounded like such a practical, not that sort of person in the anecdotes. Yeah. The more recent ones.
I think I don't know. I think my family's more complex than any set of stories has conveyed.
Right.
Yeah. And then at some point, my dad did a cord cutting on me and told me about it. I was probably 7. I don't think my brother had been born yet. He told me that he couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't handle coming to my aid so much. And so I didn't know that it was cord cutting at the time, but now that I'm older, I look back and I realize that was when our relationship kind of ended.
Wow.
Or at least most of it.
Right.
And then by the time I always believed in the magic. And then I think I was probably 12 or 13 when I actually started practicing and studying magic. And my dad had a fucking fit.
Really?
Yeah, he was like, I raised you without religion so you could choose your own religion, and you chose wrong. And I'm like, what a test.
Was he hoping for Catholicism?
I don't know! And that was the weird thing is my parents met in church,
really?
but do not go to church.
Right.
They didn't go to church. They only met in church because I think my mom's sister took my mom, and I don't know who took my dad, but it wasn't like a thing they did. I think it was just like their version of Hinge at the time. Like,
It totally was.
and then as soon as they were pregnant, they stopped going to church. My parents, like, I've never gone to church with my parents. I've never seen my parents go to church. Like,
That is so
it was
bizarre.
just this weird social dating activity, and then it was done. And so for my dad to like have expectations, but then that's why I go back to the witch hunter terminology.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, my dad was searching for something that he believed in, but didn't really know what to do with. And
Almost like it overwhelmed him at a certain
Absolutely,
point. And
yeah.
then he was just like, okay, this all has to stop.
and now he's kind of a conspiracy theorist.
Right.
But there's always magic in it.
Right.
Because there is.
Right. I was going to say,
There.
I mean, that's the whole thing about conspiracy theories. Like when people are getting nuts about money and like the temple and, you know, the Freemasons and all that other stuff. It's like that idea of a seed of truth always
Yeah.
being in.
Yeah.
Always being in these like spiraling conspiracy theories, which is in itself a form of chaos magic.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And he wanted to be a Freemason.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, well now it's I'm
Yeah.
starting to get a
Yeah.
picture here of where he went and how he kind of veered off that and then got angry about you
Yeah.
latching onto it.
Yeah. It's interesting because, like, he was very, like, I don't know, he tried to live vicariously through me in a lot of weird ways.
When you were younger or
Mhm.
now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not in a long time.
Okay.
But
Interesting.
yeah. How did you discover magic?
That's one of those things where it's like I don't remember how early sort of thing. But my mother was from the deep south. So Cajun country basically is like one side of my lineage. And she was always like a really strange person. Like my mother was very strange, very abusive.
I could see that. Well, yeah, of course.
Right, of course. Like, just kind of an abusive personality generally. But also, like, as time went on, I sort of realized that a lot of her abusiveness was born of her being stuck in, like, that place women were stuck in, like, the late 60s, early 70s, especially if you were from a place that wasn't metropolitan. So, you know, she just didn't have a lot of, like, choice in her life. And she was not formally educated really in any way. I think she maybe graduated high school and that was like kind of it for her. But she was always a really strange person and she was always able to sort of like, kind of like your dad, like sync up in such a way with particularly family members or us, me and my brother and be in the right place at the right time sort of thing. She also, like, if you know anything about like, you know, deep Cajun lore and that sort of stuff, a lot of it is a little more hexy and protective and not as much like manifesting. And so she was really good at that sort of thing. Like we had a lot of like near misses, right? Like where it was like, oh, some injury that could have turned into a catastrophe, but somehow didn't all the time. And I think I remember the thing that like kind of sealed it for me when I was like, okay, this is real. She can do this. And if she can do this, fuck, I can do it. Like, you know, because I already knew that she was a little bit unhinged. I was doing an assignment and I was in like probably like 5th or 6th grade and it had to do with dice. And I was like having to write down how many times, you'll probably know why I was doing this. It had to be in math or something. I was having to roll these dice and figure out how many times particular combinations came up. Okay. As some,
I love probability.
Right,
Yeah.
probability math, whatever, a very early version of it. And so I was like doing this in my room, doing my homework, which was what it was. And she had come in to be like, well, are you going to come to dinner or whatever? And I'm like, I'm doing this really dumb thing. And it's going to take me a while. And I don't understand the point of it. And she sat down and she was like, let me see the paper. And she's like, so which one haven't you got yet? And I was like, well, I haven't gotten like snake eyes. I haven't gotten like 2 1s. I've gotten like all these other combinations. And she's like, that's the one that's going to be next then. And then you're going to come to dinner. And I was like, okay. And she's like, why don't you roll it? And so I rolled it and I got snake eyes. And she was like, get up. And so it was very like, it's one of those things where I started to understand chaos magic, even though I didn't know what it was called. And chaos magic is just that, which is like, you work not just with like manifestation and your mind, but it's also with probability. Like you latch onto what could be probable, like what's possible first, yes, but then what's probable? And how do you make the probable all of a sudden the thing that happens? And so that's like really where I started to be like, oh, okay, this is a thing. But even before that point, like when my brother and I were really little, and I don't remember why we did this, but I just know we did it every year. It was prompted by nobody. It was just us. We had one big giant like oak tree in our front lawn. Huge enough to have a couple swings on it and stuff, like a really big leafy tree. And every autumn, when it lost its leaves, we wouldn't let our parents get rid of them. We raked them into a circle and let it sit there all winter long until, and you know how then you do that, like the leaves rot and then the grass grows up in that pattern. And so we did it every year.
Wow.
I have no idea why.
Maybe the trees were asking
It
for
was,
it?
yeah,
I mean,
it was like some sort of, I mean, if you think of chaos, it was like a, what do you call it? You know, like not a portal, but a place that like kind of gathers power, right? Like you're already dealing with something that existed there and is like, has roots in the ground and sort of thing. And it's like, well, okay, we might as well turn this into a talisman because this is like where we live, right?
Yeah.
And so it was a very weird thing.
And like the symbolism when like there's certain kinds of magic where you have to attribute them value, because if you hadn't done that, then the leaves probably would have been raked up and gotten rid of.
Right.
And the tree needs those nutrients.
Right.
So was the tree asking and saying, hey, I know that most humans will take these nutrients away from me, but they're mine, and I can interact with these kids who might listen to me.
Yeah, very strange.
I talked to trees a lot as a child.
Yeah, I
and
spent a
as a
lot of time
teenager.
with trees also.
Yeah.
Just very...
They're such a power, like, I mean, arguably, that's probably where our species learned magic from, the forests.
Right.
You know?
There's a reason
Like-
that's always in the lore,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like Lord of the Rings, like trees can walk and talk. You know? All the magicians are like, yeah, we knew that. J.R.R. Tolkien was not doing anything like particularly unique there. It's in like so much lore, but yeah. And then I was gifted my first tarot deck when I was 13 and started learning how to do it then. And then mostly I kept up with it because it really annoyed like my father, who was a Catholic.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, well, I'll continue.
Yeah.
I'll continue to do this.
I got my first deck probably around the same time. Maybe a little older, but yeah, teenage years.
Which one was it? Do you remember?
DJ Conway's Celtic Dragon Tarot.
Oh my God, mine was Celtic too!
Yeah, I love it. It's so good.
Crazy. It's like mine was the Celtic something or other. I don't remember. It wasn't that one. I personally did not feel attachment. Like I actually ended up gifting it to Jessica last year or the year before because possibly because it just held too much early weird trauma for me. And I was like, I don't know that I've ever felt like truly attached to this in the sense of like being a professional now. And so I kind of stopped using it, and I don't think I ever really had like attachment to the Celtic symbolism for whatever reason. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Like I hate the Celtic cross. I never do that tarot spread. I hate it so much. I think it's so unnecessary, but that's just me being a weirdo.
I mean, we all have different. It's flavors. It's
Exactly.
personalities. It's textures, and
Exactly.
yeah.
So I didn't really like find like I don't know cards that I liked until I guess more recently, like in the past 10 years. Like I said, like trying to do it for other people too, which makes a huge.
Yeah, I really took to it as a kid, and like I remember in high school I'd bring my deck with me, and people would ask me to do readings, and oh my God, we used to go to Sherry's, and
I did them in
do tarot.
diners. Yes, I did tarot in diners.
We used to get in trouble. No gambling in here. No gambling.
Yeah.
in here.
I was
And it's
like, you don't know what this is, do you?
Or you do know what this is, so
Right.
just say it. Just say no
Yes,
witchcraft.
yes.
Just burn us in public like the old days. Like,
Yes.
and it's like, it was so frustrating because it's like it goes into this whole like Christian persecution fetish they have,
Yeah.
where it's like, just say the thing out loud.
Right. I know.
Just say the thing out loud.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, they can't
But they
because
can't.
they're like, oh, I sound like an asshole. Well, because you're an asshole.
Because you're an asshole. I mean,
your religion is full of assholes.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't worn my pentacle in forever, because eventually it was too exhausting. Like
Yeah.
I used to have people come up to me randomly and just say, you're going to hell.
It's
And
wild.
it's like, Jesus fucking Christ.
I know.
Are you allowed to say that?
This
We didn't really talk about.
this is the Cranky Astrologer podcast. You're allowed to say fuck as often as you want because
Like-
I certainly write it enough. Like that's not going to be a problem. I did it in Denny's, and I also did it in this diner in our hometown where Jake and I went to school in southeastern Michigan called Silverman's, and I remember doing it was like one of the first times I had done it for anybody outside of my family or myself or my friend, right? And it was this guy who randomly walked over to the table and he was like, "Oh, are you telling fortunes?" And I was like, 16, and I'm like, "Sure, yeah, I'm telling fortunes." I was like, I didn't even realize that somebody would pay for that kind of shit at that point, and I was just like, yeah. And also, I'm like a 16-year-old girl, and it was this random dude, and so I kind of locked up. But he sat down, and he wasn't weird. He was just like, "I'm just going through it. I really need somebody to tell me stuff." And so I was like, "Okay," and I was still learning. And so I did it, and I had to check my book a couple times, but then I sort of it was like a ton of swords, and it was not a good spread. I remember that much, but I remember him sitting there with his fries and being like, "Well, that's what's going on." And I remember being like, "Well, holy shit. I guess that is what's going on," and I felt alternately odd, but also bad for him, right? And that I couldn't give him any more clarity. And I think that was the moment where I was like, I should try to get actually good at this, because this person was looking for something, to almost assuage whatever he was going through.
Mm-hmm.
He was clearly going. I remember him telling me he was going through a divorce and stuff, and it was kind of tragic sounding. And so that moment I really is burned into my memory of, there's almost a responsibility in some way when you're reading that to other people to not, I don't know, be shallow about it, I guess. Maybe.
I mean, it's like any form of therapy. It's any light work and shadow work and healing, and it's also it's such a skill for practicing empathy.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, that's true. This was a person I would have had nothing in common with otherwise.
Yeah.
But I was just I remember him looking so crushed, this guy was so crushed and about what was going on with him. And I had it was all laid out there on the cards. So then after that, I tried to, be a little more intentional about who I was reading to. But I also got kicked out of several diners. I never got kicked out of that one, but I got kicked out of a couple Denny's a couple times when I was with my friend. And the woman came over and she didn't say no gambling, although that was a different time somebody said that to me, but I can't remember what she said. She was really concerned, and she was like, "You can't do that in here." And I was and she's an adult and we were still teenagers. She's like, "You need to put that away." And I'm thinking what is wrong with you, lady? They're cards. The fuck?
Because everyone knows magic is real.
Right.
Everyone knows magic is real.
Right, because if it's not, what are you so pressed about?
What are you afraid of?
Yeah. What are the Christians so pressed about?
Well, and I mean, the Bible says magic is real. They believe in magic. They just think it's bad.
Every pope, every king,
oh my God.
every tyrant throughout history has always had a fortune teller, a tarot reader, or an astrologer telling them what to do. And let me tell you about what's rich about that is that I think it was maybe a couple months ago, the Pope actually in one of his random statements, because the Pope is still making random public statements. Let's not even get into that part, but. He was saying something probably talking about birth rates or something, and how everybody's, human beings need to stop despairing and keep creating people. And he was like, we're falling into vices and we're falling into despair. And he mentioned, abortion, of course, and probably gay people or something. And then he mentioned astrologers.
Okay.
He actually literally used astrology as something that was a sign of, societal, spiritual decay. Not even knowing his own history, which is that the Catholic Church has always believed in astrology and used it to their own ends many, many, many times, as has every system of government. Yeah. Donald Trump probably has astrologers, and we don't fucking know about it.
Yeah, he might not even know about it.
Right.
He might have astrologers he doesn't even know about.
Oh, I'm sure.
I mean, it's
his chart's available. It's wild. He has a wild chart. And a lot of astrologers called him winning this election, actually, because he was born during an eclipse.
Whoa.
And he was born during...
Solar or lunar?
Solar.
Of course.
He was born during a solar eclipse. And it was, I believe it was the in the same sign in Aries that we had this past spring. Like that was his eclipse, and that kind of began his momentum. And I think he also has something to do with Mars being retrograde in Leo right now. Like he's got a bunch of stuff in his chart that actually, I don't dig into like the micro aspect of mundane astrology much, because I'm much more interested in like big waves and how they affect all of us as a society. But a lot of mundane astrologers really like to get into other people's charts and start predicting things. And a lot of them were like, Donald Trump, it shows him falling on hard times, or something hindering him or restricting him from 2020 to 2024. But then it's like his chart blows up for 2025.
Wow.
Yeah, and it also showed it in 2016. Like he's got a couple of like really weird fixed stars in there. He's a bizarre, almost like actually somebody wrote a book about this called Dark Star Rising, which is about how Donald Trump is like the ultimate chaos mage without knowing it, because the man just operates on id. So he doesn't have any of the fucking ego or super ego that we have to constantly try to get rid of to enact our will, basically. He just does it.
Wow.
And that's why he's so dangerous.
Yeah.
It's like he doesn't even know. He's just he's enacting chaos magic as he walks and breathes and fucking, rains catastrophes everywhere he goes. And it's not even on purpose. He just likes a lot of attention,
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like he's hooked into something here that is now, it's this catalyst that I don't think is possible to stop. As far as, what's happening, what's going to happen. But yeah, Dark Star Rising.
Interesting.
Chaos Magic book about Donald Trump.
I'll have to check that out.
Yes.
That's insane. I mean,
I
it's
know.
like,
But when you think about it, it makes sense though.
yeah.
Right? Because that's what we're always trying to eliminate when we talk about. Like, there's another good book, I think, I don't remember if you got it from my store. It's called Advanced Magic for Beginners.
Mm-mm.
I think it's Alan someone who wrote it. It's very good.
I'll check it
And
out.
he goes through, it's very much like the stuff that you write a lot. Like just like just when you're like, let me plot this out. That's kind of how he does it. He's like, this is how you plot out magic, and you do all these steps and you build up all this ritual. And then eventually when you get to that point, you start taking the steps of the ritual away, but you keep the will where it is. And that's the advanced stage basically
Yeah.
of chaos.
Yeah, it's like when they talk about visualization techniques, and it's like imagining things in the 4D, whatever
Right.
you want to call it.
Yes.
And it's like if you don't have, if your super conscious isn't getting in the way of your imagination, if you are more or less a man-child walking around with the capacity to live out your imagination without any obstacles
Yes.
and any consequences,
Yes.
then why wouldn't they? I mean, like, that's how all of my best magic is manifested. Is
Yeah.
it's like I decide where I want to be, and then I get there.
And the more, and this is going to sound pejorative, but I don't think it necessarily always has to be, but one of the theories, when you read different chaos people like Jen P in that book I showed you, or Austin Osman Spares, another like big chaos version, is that the more desperation, the more intense the need, right, for whatever it is that you need to happen or are asking to happen, the more potent, like if you decide to translate that into a ritual or translate that into a sigil or translate it into something, the more likely it is that that's like the more potent, the more that it would work, basically. So kind of like how you and I are like, well, when it's supposed to happen, it's going to happen. And on the outside, it looks like I'm a huge procrastinator, which I am. I'm a huge procrastinator. But then I get to this point of desperation in certain situations, and it's almost like the desperation is what pushes the thing
Yeah.
out of my brain and into existence.
Yeah. I think the physical magic really is fueled by deadlines.
Yes.
If you're trying to learn how to fly and you get pushed out of the nest, you either succeed or you don't.
Right.
And
Or you die.
Or you die. And like whatever that means, quantum immortality.
Right.
Do you get to restart the game? I don't know.
Yeah.
But like
Nietzsche says yes. You do.
and I I think that we do. And
Absolutely.
like it's like with all of the things that I've been dealing with, where it's like it wasn't until I was right on the precipice of I don't want to say failure because it's not what it
Right.
felt like, when I got rid of the worrying about the outcome, then the procrastination didn't feel like procrastination anymore.
Yeah.
I watched this TikTok last night that was about I'll probably have to make something about it because it was really good. She like kind of created like an axis of like wanting to do something versus feeling like doing something. And I'll have to cite the source. I'll have to find who it is. So we
Okay,
can-
I'm following.
But she basically talked about how there's things that you want to do and then you do them. When people want to do things, they do them. Like it's very id. If I'm hungry and nothing is standing in my way between me and food, I'm going to eat. I want to eat, so I'm going to. But then there's there's feeling like doing something where it's like, do you feel inclined? Are you motivated to do the thing? Because you can want to eat and have hunger, but you might feel disinclined to actually get out of bed.
Right, or it's
if you're
too much
depressed,
work,
It's too much
or-
work. And
yeah.
sometimes and obviously that can lead to some troubles, but like she was talking about it more on like goal setting. And like, so if you've got a goal that you want to complete, but you don't feel like completing, you're at an impasse. You're not going to do it. If you have what, capitalism would want us to call discipline, then you
Right.
might supersede your feelings and do it anyway. And I would argue that the things that I've done best in life don't fall into that category
Yeah,
at all. The
I
things
agree.
that I've done best never fit into that category. But the things that work best for me are the things where I want to do them and then I feel like doing them.
Yeah.
And even if I was procrastinating, when that feeling clicks and I do it, the results are fantastic.
Exactly.
And I'm happy about them.
right.
When I look at projects where it's like, okay, I forced myself to do it and I got it done and I got it done before the deadline, I'm never happy with the results. It doesn't
agree.
matter how good they are.
That's
I'm
true.
never happy about them.
Yeah.
Because going on my trip to New York where I was like, I waited until the last minute to pack.
Yes.
And then I thought, what if I don't pack? And I regret packing.
Right.
Because we just wore pajamas the entire trip.
Right.
I should have packed nothing. I should have waited
knew.
till the last minute and then
Yes.
packed nothing.
Yes.
And I would have been fine.
And that would have been chaos
And
magic.
that's yeah.
Yes.
And it was like half chaos magic.
right,
Like,
right, because you did
Yeah.
pack.
And I am glad that I waited till the last minute though.
Yeah.
Because procrastinating saved me time.
Honestly,
And-
yes. That's sometimes that's how I feel about like I have a big piece of writing or something that I'm trying to do, and I always push it. But then I think to sometimes then I get to the end result when I do that, and I really like it, and I'm like, would I like this if I had done the responsible writerly thing of taking little chunks of it every day?
and-
Like I don't write that way.
What writer does?
I don't know.
I don't know any writers who don't write to deadlines. I know
right.
that's a monolithic statement, but like none of them are in my life.
Yeah, I don't know. Yes, I definitely write to deadlines. And there's like, again, that desperation, urgency. I don't know
Yeah.
like what that word is, which is exactly what you're saying. The difference between I want to do this and I feel the need to do this right now. It's a fine line, but it's a very important one, I think. And that's why.
And like there's also
That's why Donald Trump is so powerful without even knowing it. Because all he does is like, I want to eat this burger. I want to like rape this woman. You know what I mean? Truly,
And he does
though.
it, and he acts on
does
it,
it,
yeah.
and he acts on
and
it
he
immediately.
and he says things that we argue are not rational.
Right.
And it's the irrationality, or at least the spontaneity of it, that gives it the power that it has.
Yes.
The snowballing. And obviously, like, we can disagree with the intent, clearly, but he gets results because of it.
Yep.
Because he's not standing in the way of himself.
No. Absolutely.
It's so chaotically unfiltered.
It is, yes. And that makes it extremely effective.
Yeah.
It's extremely effective what he's doing.
And it's interesting because it's also like it's reinforcing, and it reinforces the audience, because if he doesn't think about his actions and he gets results quickly,
Right.
then the people who are watching him and supporting him might learn not to to not overanalyze it either.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's perfect for him.
Right. It's basically like the most natural, like version of a cult.
Yeah.
Right? It's not remotely, he didn't build this with a plan in mind or anything. It's just
very organic.
It's an organic, instantaneous cult. And if you ever see that footage of, you know, his rallies or whatever the hell they are, right? And there's people, their faces are wrapped. I mean, they are just like, this is their Lord and Savior. And it doesn't even matter. The content of what he's saying barely matters.
Like when he was dancing for an hour.
Yeah.
And you're just like, this man wanted to take a break. He was tired of talking.
Right.
So he danced, and I don't even know if dance is the correct word.
No, it's the jerking off like
Yes.
two goats like on either side of you. Like,
And he's been
that's
doing
what
the
he does.
YMCA thing lately.
Right. And it's
Which-
like, do you know what you're talking
Yes,
about?
it's the YMCA. His usage of YMCA is a lot like these churches that are playing like a prayer.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, these are songs that are very much not in alignment with
Right.
you.
Right. Do they know what they're in alignment with,
No,
though? I mean,
no,
there's no
yeah.
alignment in that. These are people who are really pro-death, in my
Pro-death.
opinion.
Absolutely.
But still call themselves the opposite, which in and of itself is also a weird chaos ruse, right? Like, oh, we're pro-life, we're Christians. One of my biggest pet peeves is this new use of the phrase Christian fascism because it's redundant.
Yeah.
Christians have always been
Yeah.
fascists.
And it's like how like as someone who doesn't believe in ethical monogamy,
Yeah.
Christian fascism suggests that there's a non-fascist
Right.
Christianity. There isn't.
There isn't.
We know that.
Exactly, but
We know
nobody
that.
ever wants to say it.
Yeah.
No, you know, the thing that it's like the no true Scotsman thing. All you get from these people is when you point out an example of someone's horrifying behavior. The thousands, millions of priests who molest children, right? Like these horrible. They just convicted another person out in like Utah or wherever, who his whole point was to gather young women, sex traffic them, and call them all his wives, right? I call them women. They weren't. They were children. They were like 9 to 14-year-olds that this
I did not
man.
hear about that.
They just convicted him. And when you point this out, the general public rabble decides to say, well, those aren't real Christians. Right? That's always those aren't real Christians. Well, these people who want to install fascism and authority, they're not real Christians. I would argue that those are exactly the real Christians. That is exactly what that religion, what all Abrahamic religions have always wanted to do, is like what, you know, those biologists speak about, which is impose social order. That in of itself is always going to end up fascist. How can it not?
You know, you have a God who wants to be called the Lord,
Right.
and is just like this most patriarchal symbol of like a man, a father figure who can do no wrong.
Yeah.
Who cannot contradict himself because his word right now is law. If it is not in agreement with what he said yesterday, that doesn't matter because his word right now is law. He can say anything he wants right now, and it cannot contradict anything.
Yep.
Because it is always right.
Yep.
No matter what. He can say two diametrically opposed things and they are both true. And you need to kill your own child and also not kill your own child at the same time.
Right.
It's every decree he has is a Schrodinger effect of like, and you can't do anything right.
No.
There is no way to appease this
always
man.
a sinner. You're
always
always
a sinner.
going to hell, or you're always having to be redeemed. And the entire thing that always kills me too is that the way to that redemption is to attend this church, drink his blood, eat of his body, you know. Basically, they transferred everything, the way the human race evolved, which was all your nutrients originally come from women. And they were like, oh no, it's him. He's the one that doing this. In fact, his mother was a virgin. Like, you're like, okay, all right, sure, yeah. Like the fact that this
Women contribute nothing to society.
Nothing. They didn't birth Christ. They didn't feed him. You nurse on his blood. Like they're the most.
Mary was incidental to the process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's ridiculous. And so
That's not real Christianity. That's exactly real
it's
Christianity.
exactly real Christianity.
That's exactly what it is.
It's like, have you read the Bible? Either
Well,
of them? Like they're insane.
And that's the thing is like I saw this TikTok the other day where this guy was like, I sat down, I'm an atheist, I read the Bible, and here's all these crazy things that made me wonder how anyone could believe this. And it's like, the people who read the Bible, who genuinely read the Bible, are either atheistic and find it reprehensible.
Yeah.
Or they've been reading it and indoctrinated by it for so long that even though they might be able to tell you every single proverb, they can't critically think about it outside. It's like when, like, you know, when you sing a hymn and you don't know the words, but you know all the words.
Yeah.
And you've internalized these meanings.
Yes.
Because that's a kind of magic. It's hypnagogic.
It is hypnagogic. Yes.
You've
Church
been,
is very hypnagogic.
of course,
Of
you know,
course.
like, oh, let's sing and dance and have these communal bonds that have been
Right.
co-opted because we're not allowed to have any sort of friendships outside of these moments.
Exactly. Otherwise, we might learn what bullshit this all is.
If I learn to like someone who doesn't believe in this weird thing I'm doing,
Exactly.
I might question it.
Which is why they can't get around any of that verbiage in the Bible to actually like dissect any of it or compare it to real life. It's like you're all following like the Goat Herder's Guide to the Galaxy, basically, like this compendium of bullshit that was actually written by dudes hundreds of years after there may have been some dude in, you know, Judea or wherever. I can guarantee that his name wasn't Jesus, and I can guarantee that Matt wasn't Matt and Paul wasn't Paul, because we're talking about the fucking Middle East. Like, I don't even know how people get around that portion of it, to be honest. But it's that cognitive dissonance, which is what I can't remember what writer I read this on, but they were like, what you're feeling when you... Cognitive dissonance is a fancy phrase for the feeling of suspecting that you're wrong, but being unable to face it.
Yeah.
And that is just Abrahamic religion in a nutshell. Like, that's what they do.
It is a fear-based religion.
Yeah.
It's that's all it is. And it's like, I always tell people, like, well, what if, you know, someday you're sitting in front of God and you're being judged and you know, what are you going to do then? And I'm like, I would rather go to hell than
Right.
worship this person. And it's interesting because like they don't want us using magic, and I think it's because as a magician, as someone who identifies publicly as a magician, I know that my belief and my magic, they're synonymous. It's one thing. The things I believe in are my magic. My magic is my belief. What I believe in becomes real. Choosing to believe in a God gives them something.
Yeah.
And this God wants us to willingly give it up, which means I have a choice. I do have free will. If I give it to him freely, I will lose something irreplaceable. And I am not going to make that choice, because this is a man who has shown us who his true character is. And you know, they talk about heaven being eternal. If there is a heaven, it's a place that is probably terrifying and precarious.
Right.
That at any given moment, all of the pleasures might be taken from you.
Right.
Because God changes his mind all the fucking time.
Right.
So, like, we
Kill
know...
your child.
Yeah.
No, I was kidding.
I was kidding.
No, I wasn't.
We some of his angels left him.
I know.
Like, this is absurd.
Right.
Like,
there was a rebellion. Like not everybody agreed.
this is weird. Like, it's, like, this is a strange deity to be worshiping.
I agree.
And it's like...
It kills me that people would possibly think that a man was in charge of everything. Give me a fucking break.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
It's
Like,
so absurd.
men don't birth. Why would you... Any deity that doesn't give birth, give me a fucking break.
They think that women were made out of a rib, and it's not even in the Bible. Like, that's not even how it...
Right. No, it's like a dust thing.
And
Everybody was
like,
sprung out of dust. I don't know.
Like the whole, like, well, you know, men have less ribs than women because of it. And it's like, no, we have the same number of ribs.
I know, because again, Goat Herder's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Like, why in 2024 are we like, well, I don't know, what does this Bible say? It said you couldn't mix textiles or you'd go to hell. It said if you eat shellfish, you're going to hell. You know what I mean? It said to, like, let your daughters be raped by a crowd instead of letting the angels be raped. It says a bunch of bullshit. Why are you listening to this? Like, why? Who in their right mind is thinking that this weird primordial, you know, musings that really just like take everything away from the religions that they stole it all from, right? You know, which is why it's funny to have people in a diner walk up to you and say, you can't do that in here. It's like, really? Because all I'm doing is like the ritual, light the thing on fire, say the thing, watch the smoke go up into the sky. It's pretty fucking similar, lady.
Ring a bell, eat
Ring
the
a
cracker.
bell, eat the thing. Yeah, exactly. Like, have the ritual feast or chewing or whatever has to happen. And there you go. But again, these I think that they've sort of, I think like Christians have manifested their own like version of chaos in this moment in time. And that's what it's like this evil sort of perpetuation. You know, they say this stuff so often that their verbalizing of their bullshit makes it true in their mind. I'm pro-life, I'm pro-life, I'm pro-life. Not only that, but then it makes it true in other people's minds who aren't even attached to that religion. They just spew it because they've heard it so much.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the Christian pro-lifers, they're not pro-life. If anything, they are a massive death cult. Absolutely. They have always been a massive death cult. And how convenient that you can't prove any of this shit until you die. Well, just trust me on this. There's a heaven and a hell. You're not going to know about it yet. But I swear there is one. I can't prove it. And Jesus did say we get all the money. I can't prove he said it, but I'm telling you, you're going to find out. You just have to die first.
He was very much against banks, though.
Right, yeah.
Well,
and then, like, I understand that, too, because I understand how there might have been some sort of sect or, gathering of these people in Rome, late-stage Rome, which was a horrible place to live, right? Like, it was awful. It was a horrible society for women. It was horrible for anybody who wasn't, like, part of the Senate or whatever. I mean, it was a very vicious, violent society, kind of like us. And so, so much. In a lot of ways, like, at that time, that idea, that brotherly love idea, was an improvement, I guess, to a degree. It was a slight improvement on, locking women away in their houses for their lives and not letting them come out except on special holidays and not allowing them to sing or speak in public or any of that. Like, it was kind of like, oh no, like, maybe treat these people like they're still objects, but like be nice to your objects is kind of like where Abrahamic religion was going, I think. So it was like a slight improvement in ancient Rome. Not now. It's not an improvement now. But now we've got these people who have we've got, Donald Trump, chaos mage extraordinaire, through no will of his own, just because he only exists on pure id, sort of forming this unholy alliance with this crazy Christian cult that has gained such a huge amount of power.
It's like the family,
right?
Like these Project 2025.
Exactly.
My hope is that, like, and this is kind of what, like, why I want to get a sword, why I want to build these rituals of, like, kind of just like butterfly affecting of like, we know his predispositions to this id childlike mentality that makes him predisposed to tantrums when he doesn't get his way. And so I almost feel like the secret is just like the magical equivalent of like pouring out a bag of marbles near him or like throwing down a banana peel. Because, and not even just near him, but near his magicians and these other cults. His cabal, yes.
Which is really what it is.
Yes,
it's
that
like
is.
This criminal cabal, that is.
And it's like, because it's like, all it takes is, and like we're seeing this right now where it's like people that he's putting into positions that aren't getting nominated or getting voted down or getting like unvetted from certain things.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking, okay, if we can just throw down some banana peels and make it so that a couple of these people fall through, because that's what it's feeling like. Is a couple of these people, I was expecting everything to just get pushed through and just, we would just be a dictatorship on Tuesday kind of thing.
Right.
And it's like, luckily, I think we're all kind of fighting a little bit, and there's a little bit of class consciousness coming up.
There sure
and
is.
And especially with, this CEO shooting.
Yep.
And I just keep thinking, okay, if we can point all of our silver swords at getting in the way of some of these things, because if enough things get in his way, what does a man-child do? He throws a tantrum. And when Donald Trump throws tantrums, that's when he loses the support of these people who are the cabal like, I can't remember her name. The person, that woman that I told you about that he's got behind him that's been puppeteering things.
Oh, is it his chief of staff?
I think so. I think
Susie Wiles?
Yes.
That bitch?
Yes. She gives me Dick Cheney vibes where I'm
Oh,
like, you might be
yeah.
Satan incarnate
Right.
number 2.
Right.
And
yeah.
like I read this interview that was like,
She's one of those women who would like smile and give you an apple pie and fucking stab you under the
Yes.
table. Like
Yes.
that is
Mhm.
who that woman is. It emanates off of her image.
yes,
just on the
she
screen.
reminds me of Elon Musk's mother.
Yes.
They're probably friends, or
Oh,
probably
absolutely.
bitter enemies, but like,
Right, one of
you
them.
know.
There's a polarity there,
Yes.
though, that has a very strong
Yeah.
connection.
because these people don't have friends.
No,
like that's
absolutely
the,
not.
that's the other thing.
That's
it's like
so
the way they
pedestrian
turn.
for them.
Yes.
How gauche, friends.
How gauche. Yes. Like they just because they never stick around with each other.
No.
It's a constant revolving door.
Mhm.
Their divorce rates are crazy for
Mhm.
people who don't believe in divorce.
Right. They just
they-
don't believe in divorce for anybody.
Yeah.
You know, everything is allowable for them. It's like what you say, like the very rich that are the Oz behind the curtain doesn't even need to use money. He's too powerful for that. You know, they don't need divorce. They don't need to follow rules. There are no rules for people like that.
They think that Trump has money, and it's like he doesn't have money.
No.
He steals money.
I
He
know.
doesn't have cash.
Mhm.
He has $500 million in debt. The last time I read a number.
Yeah, he's
It's all
essentially
fake.
owned by Deutsche Bank, is my understanding. Like he's really just a little toy that Deutsche Bank
Mm-hmm.
plays with, and really Deutsche Bank is just a little toy that the rest of the criminals play with.
Mm-hmm.
Saudi Arabian prince and Putin and all those people are just like, oh yeah, Deutsche Bank, we'll use this to harness these other people, and we won't ever know anything about them. It's wild.
Yeah.
But I do think that transactional nature is what ultimately always fells chaos magic or not, right? Like Donald Trump having that or not. And he does have a fair amount of it, but it's always what fells fascist, or authoritarian or tyrants, any of those sorts of forms of control. They always sort of crumble pretty quickly because of their transactional nature, because none of these people actually like each other. And as soon as
They
one...
have no loyalty.
Yeah,
they have
none.
And none of them have any genuine connections. There's
No.
nothing authentic. And I think I'm going to have to think about this, but I feel like there's probably something about entropy and debt, where it's like if your system is collapsing entropically, eventually all debts have to be paid then. And that, like, when we live in a system like this, where it's like everything is mutually assured destruction built on the planet somehow owing...
Right.
Somehow we owe money to someone somewhere.
Right.
It's like that. The debt circle
Yes.
is constantly getting bigger.
Right. Even though we're all still on one planet.
Yeah, we're all
somehow.
here. Who do we owe this money to?
Right.
I'll
The
borrow
Martians.
$5 to pay you $5.
Yeah.
That you'll pay. I'm like,
Which in and of itself is this
It's
like
so crazy.
Odegra whirlwind that perpetuates, this kind of evil magic. It's
Yeah.
this evil
what
intent.
is a spiral?
Yeah.
What is a spiral?
Right.
Like in magical structural form, that is power.
Absolutely.
That is a sigil. Maybe one of the
oldest.
It
and
might be
most
the
powerful.
most basic sigil.
Yeah.
A line that is, from some angles, it's rotating and rotating and rotating and
Gathering power.
gathering power, and yeah.
But that's a little optimistic in my opinion. Only because it's like the Third Reich, right? Like it was like they, and now we have social media and we're all connected to the internet. So I imagine that the crumbling might happen much faster, but more chaotically and more violently possibly. Only because of how social media and digitization has sped everything up, right? Like there's no way that we would have seen the reaction that we've seen and are continuing to see from the masses about this CEO shooting. Like it wouldn't be possible to have this reaction in the late 90s.
No, the news media. I mean, like I don't watch the news, but the TikToks I've
Does
watched.
anyone watch the news?
Someone
must. I don't know.
But like when I'll watch a TikTok where in the background they're showing you a news clip,
Yes.
and it's like, this is like it's so propagandized. Like
Yeah.
the story that they're when they were like, we don't know the motive. What do you mean you don't know the motive?
Right.
He wrote it down, and also
Yep.
he shot someone in the back in broad daylight. Motives for things like that are pretty hard to hide.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
he was going to work. He was going to a business meeting. The business meeting that he missed, they continued. They stepped over his body. They walked past him to go into this bank meeting to talk about the profiting off of death.
I saw that.
What do you mean there's no motive?
I know. It's like
Like-
the whole thing was so, it unfolded like a film
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah.
That it was so pat. It followed like certain story structure where that's why it's suspicious.
And that's him getting caught the way it did.
yeah.
It feels like someone is now crafting a narrative around the narrative that was
Yes,
made.
this
And that's-
weird meta narrative.
Yeah,
is
because
happening.
they knew if they allowed this to play out DB Cooper style,
Right.
well, 40 years later we're gonna be like, but we would have had revolution.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
they had to create. It's like with the binary code, the puzzle. That's not a real puzzle. If someone wants to encrypt something, that's not how you do it because that's not encrypted.
Mm-hmm.
You just put it into Google, and so we've got this new narrative that's coming out that feels so constructed and artificial and fake.
Yes.
And it's like,
As does everything.
yeah, and it's like they went from telling us a story on TV that no one was watching because we watched TikTok
Right.
that was obviously a lie, and
Yeah.
then they said, okay, well, shoot, the kids aren't falling for it,
Right.
so we're gonna find this hot guy because it turns out they really like hot guys.
Yes.
Because we're all men obsessed idiots.
Right,
Like,
yes, yes,
like
yes.
why our downfall.
What I'll do for a strong chin.
Yeah, it's like nice brows, nice well manicured brows.
Right.
Speaking of well manicured,
Yeah.
why is it that in 5 days he's no longer like the? Come on.
All
Anyway.
of it, like, okay, so this person who we know, when did it happen? When did the CEO get shot? Was it on like Wednesday? I need to check the astrology on this too because I do think it aligns with some of the like sun and there was some malefic stuff going on with the sun last week, and the sun typically represents like authority and power. I think I pulled a couple tarot cards last week too that were like, oh, it might be something kind of weird happening with that. So I need to check the day that he was shot. But so he's shot. They don't catch the guy on that day. They have enough camera footage to know that he fled on an e-bike to Central Park or somewhere and then jumped onto a bus.
Disposed of a backpack full of Monopoly money.
Dispose of a backpack full of Monopoly money in Central Park. They still hadn't found him. They just found his like trail of clues. The next day we discovered that he put like deny, depose, or defend, depose on his bullets, which that's a cold ass move right there.
I'm honestly surprised that we found that out.
I know, I am too.
I almost feel like
it's a red herring or something.
it's too good to be a red herring.
Okay.
I think it was a slip.
Really?
My guess is that when it happened, they didn't know. It's like with the Ben Shapiro thing.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone with money or power thought we were going to rally behind this murder. Because this is an extrajudicial This is extrajudicial
Yeah.
vengeance.
Yeah.
We all whatever it is,
Yeah.
And I think when those details came out, I don't think that they would have put those details out. I don't think we would know that the bullets said that if they had
understood
if they had known what was coming.
the depth and scope of the
Yeah,
reaction.
and I think and especially with them pushing the whole professional assassin thing, where it's like,
Yeah.
he's obviously not a professional assassin. He obviously practiced.
Yeah.
He obviously prepared for this.
Well, like
He
you
put work.
said, I mean, in this day and age, probably any number of my children could be a professional assassin with playing Fortnite, Call of Duty, etc. Like, we talk about this all the time, but it's like, what did people expect? We are an armed, paranoid, poor, angry populace right now. Sick.
Physically and mentally.
Physically
we're
and mentally
broken,
ill.
we're overworked,
Yep.
we're overwhelmed.
Yep.
And like, so I don't know if you saw the thing about him playing he and his friends, or at least Luigi Mangione,
Okay. The one they're
Which
saying
the
is
guy
the
that they're
killer,
claiming is the suspect.
but
who
so many
clearly-
of us are
yeah.
like, I don't know,
Yeah.
man.
But apparently one of his friends was like, he and his friend group used to play this game where you're an assassin, and that was like the mainstream media release. The game in question is Among Us, which is the little spaceship alien game where you like, I think it's like a game of werewolf basically on a spaceship. And it's like a little cartoon with this, like, I've never played it, but I've seen it. But it's like this cute little, like, space suit. And one of them is an alien, I think.
And that's the one that taught him to shoot
That's the one that taught him to
CEOs.
shoot. Mhm. Yeah. And I'm like, not Call of Duty, not,
Oh my
any of the
God.
sniper games.
Right.
And
This is how you know that this is all manufactured by people who don't play video games
Yeah,
or know anything
yeah.
about them.
And it's like, I remember 20 years ago when they said that video games would increase gun violence.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly they didn't think that was the case.
Right.
And it's like, well, it certainly didn't reduce gun violence.
Right.
I believe I'm not a fan of guns. I'm not a fan of shooting games. I'm not interested. I don't really like competitive games in general.
Mm-hmm.
The only shooting games that I have ever found fun or acceptable are Doom, where you shoot monsters,
Yes.
and Wolfenstein,
Ah.
where you shoot Nazis.
Right.
2. We invented these in what, the 90s?
Yes,
We were
yes,
good. The
yes.
genre was good and covered in the 90s.
It
Done.
was, yeah.
And we can still play them. It's like when people have ported Doom. Like there's this like legend that you can put Doom on any computer that has a screen. People
Oh.
will turn their refrigerator into Doom. Copy machines, you put Doom on it. Your stovetop clock, Doom. And like
Your rice cooker will play
my
Doom.
rice cooker will play Doom. Like, I saw one the other day that was this guy who had a holographic display thing, and it was playing Doom.
Oh my God.
And like old Doom, not new Doom.
Right,
like
no,
old
the
Doom.
OG Doom,
The OG
yeah.
Doom. And I'm like, this is a game that was more or less perfect.
That's true.
And people are still playing
They're
it.
still playing
We
it.
didn't need new shoot 'em up
we didn't-
games.
No, we didn't.
This was enough.
Yeah.
This was enough.
Doom and Wolfenstein were pretty good.
Good
We
games.
all played those
Yeah.
in the late 90s. I don't know if those video games really did. I mean, it's like, I guess you could make the argument that yes, they didn't stop gun violence, but like neither does like letting everybody have a gun, and we don't seem to have a problem with that.
True.
You know what I mean? It's like, okay, there's the video games, and then there's like letting everybody have a gun.
Mm-hmm.
One of these seems a little more acute.
Yeah,
in a
like
way.
if we didn't all have guns and we played shooting games,
Right.
that the disconnect would probably be enough where we wouldn't
Exactly.
have, or like that TikTok that I was telling
Like you
about.
wouldn't even think that would be something you do in real life if we didn't have guns.
Yeah,
You'd be like, oh,
yeah.
this is such a fun fantasy.
This-
Like it would
yeah.
be something entirely different than
Yeah,
what it is.
I play D&D, but I don't go out. Well, I did want to buy a sword. Well, I want a sword gifted to me to be accurate,
Okay.
but not to stab anyone with. But it's like
Are you sure?
I don't know.
I think
I
I might
wanted
stab
as
somebody.
meta. Yeah, I mean, I was making that gesture
As
a
long
lot
as you
earlier.
have caffeine,
And
you're
I
fine.
yes, and I did say I wanted a stiletto if I could choose. So it really does
yeah.
go in with the hand gesture.
Right,
It's like how I immediately think of fire as a weapon.
Right? Yes.
It's not a tool for cooking.
No.
It's a weapon for vengeance.
That's the D&D.
Every time. Like yes, the D&D of
The
it all.
D&D of it all. So fire is a weapon.
Yeah.
We should get swords. Yeah.
I love when you're playing a role-playing game and something happens, a bar brawl, and someone is like, how much damage does this chair do? Like, roll for smashing someone over the head with a table. Right. Is 18 strength good enough
Is that
to pick
gonna
up this
do it?
couch?
Is that-
Like,
right,
like-
exactly. You have to figure out, well, what can I pick up with
Yeah,
this?
yeah.
What can I hurt somebody with? These herbs? No, shit.
Yeah. Well,
Casting a spell. There we
Yeah.
go. I did it. That's how
little-
magic like.
a little bit of herb poison is nice too.
All right. Well, that's. I think that's it.
All right.
We did our inaugural speak on magic.
I only
What
looked
should
at
we
myself a couple times.
Excellent. I try not to look at myself at all because
Yeah.
I freak myself
Yeah.
out. But what should we discuss next week?
Is the shelf broken? Does it do that? Is that?
Oh no!
Oh, no.
It's just the angle.
Oh, that's so weird. I love it.
I love it. Very
It's so
chaos.
trippy.
Very chaos.
And there's like the skull in the middle. Oh,
Right.
that's so cool. Do we like? We give a teaser? What are we talking about next week?
yeah.
Kind of thing.
What are we talking about?
What are we
next
talking
week?
about next week? I wouldn't say this was well planned. But also, we talked about that.
We did.
This was supposed to happen last week, and it didn't, so we're here. And if we hadn't done it, we'd be sitting somewhere else.
Right.
Oh, I was also going to say, we were talking about procrastination.
Yes.
And I was going to mention that, especially for people like us, who tend to be not only procrastinators, but perfectionists.
Yes.
If you procrastinate, you are publishing your first draft.
That's true.
And you are publishing. If you are not procrastinating, you are writing your first draft.
Right.
And then you are procrastinating and publishing your 12th draft.
Exactly.
Is that better?
That's exactly.
That's a lot of work.
I agree. And one of my very early writing classes, I remember the guy asking, like, the lecture hall, he was like, when is your piece done? And people were like, well, when you do somebody raised their hand, oh, when you finish revision 4. And somebody else was like, well, when the professor signs off, and I remember shouting out, when it's due.
Yeah. Yes. Like,
and I remember the prof, and this was like it was like a trip for pre-college or something, and the professor was like, that one, when it's due. It's done when it's due.
Yeah.
It's done when you have to do it. It's done when it has to go on air is when it's done. If you're a chaos mage, like we are, then it's like, okay, because that's when you need it to go on, not when you think maybe you should plan to want it to go on, which is what that one woman was talking about too. Okay, well, this week we discussed like origins, magic origins, right? And we dove a little bit into like what current events look like and how magic maybe is being like how people like Donald Trump use magic. So maybe next week is going to be how does the resistance use magic? Because we spoke a lot about how people like Trump and fascists and just sort of the pedestrians, if you will, all everything's transactional to them. And so what does the mystical resistance look like as far as not being transactional? Like, what does that community look like? How does chaos magic, how do these rituals fit in to the resistance? Because there is going to have to be a resistance, whether that is a resistance that's head on, which as we discussed today might not be the most effective resistance. The real resistance is building things that go around crumbling institutions, that go around people like Donald Trump. And a little bit of what you said, which was like, so what are the marbles that we're going to toss at these people? What is the magical banana? Because they are very Warner Brothers. Like, let's be real. Like, the right is very Warner Brothers. Yeah. So, like, it's not that hard to make Wile E. Coyote fall into the black hole. And that's definitely what he is.
J.D. Vance disappeared for like a week.
I know, I haven't heard from him forever.
It's like, all we have to do is just like, you know,
just
maybe
tell that guy that there's like some woman who wants to have 12 kids down the block, and he'll go that way, and we won't see him for like 8 weeks because he'll be like, a fecund mother. Give me more of that.
Yeah, we just rearranged the letters in his name, and he's V.D. Jantz, and he's fucked the wrong person, and now he's, you know, got syphilis, and we're problem solved.
Exactly. So next week we're going to talk about, what that looks like. What does it look like to have a mystical resistance? What are the marbles and the bananas that we can throw under these people's feet? In addition to, you know, how are we building community between ourselves and between everybody else that relies on some of these principles that we're talking about, because we're not going to be transactional. We're going to be real. And we're going to care about our community.